Welcome to Whispers of History, where the past tiptoes in soft slippers and your eyelids follow suit. This isn't your high school history class. No chalk dust. No surprise quizzes. Just the gentle hum of forgotten lives, ordinary oddities, and centuries-old bread recipes that once needed divine supervision. Tonight, we're wandering back to a city that never really slept, but certainly baked, ancient Rome. A place where gods outnumbered street signs, togas were not ironic, and yes, bakers had their own patron goddess. Because clearly, flour and fire weren't enough. You needed a divine buffer between your sourdough and the Senate. Before we wander down those flour-dusted cobblestones, I invite you, softly, gently, to like and subscribe. It helps more sleepy souls find us. As if you're still awake enough, leave a comment with your country and what time it is there right now. I like knowing who's listening across this sleepy little planet. So now, loosen your shoulders. Let your thoughts drift like dust motes in a sunbeam. And let's ease into tonight's journey. You begin in the half-light before dawn. Rome is mostly asleep, except for a few places where it never truly is. The bakeries are already alive. You can smell them before you see them. Yeast, smoke, and the ghost of a burnt crust from 3 days ago. It lingers like an old song. You walk down a narrow alley, damp stone underfoot. A cat watches you from a broken amphora, eyes half closed, as if to say, you're up early or you never went to sleep at all. Both might be true. Somewhere nearby, a wooden paddle slaps against the floor. The clatter of morning bread rituals. In Rome, bread isn't just food, it's civic duty, public entertainment, and survival. Most people don't have ovens in their homes. Your local baker is not just convenient, he's essential. Like Wi-Fi or coffee in modern terms, only with slightly fewer memes and slightly more gods. Yes, gods. See, in Rome, you don't just bake, you invoke. Before a baker slides dough into the communal oven, he might murmur a quick prayer to Fornax, the goddess of the oven flame. Fornax isn't one of your A-lister deities. She never dated Jupiter or turned into a swan. But if she abandons you mid-bake, your crust will crack and your reputation with it. Every year, Romans celebrate a festival where neighborhoods gather to honor Fornax. There's wine, laughter, and the low-stakes anxiety of hoping your bread doesn't collapse like a poorly funded temple. Historians still debate whether the festival was more religious or just an excuse to host a warm, carb-themed potluck. You pause beside one of the round communal ovens. It's shaped like a beehive, brick-lined and still radiating yesterday's heat. You'd think fire and flour would be simple enough, but Roman baking is a bureaucratic ballet. There are stamps to mark the loaves, guilds to regulate the trade, and inspectors. Yes, inspectors to ensure no one skimps on grain. You lean against a wall and feel the vibration of daily life beginning. Hooves clatter on the stone road. A child somewhere throws a tantrum with impressive Latin fluency. A woman balances a basket on her head, and the scent of honeyed dates trails behind her like a second shadow. And still the oven hums. Somewhere in the city, a priest lights a ceremonial flame for Fornax. But here, the baker just mutters something half-earnest while brushing ash from his sleeve. A practical piety. After all, no one wants a divine oven malfunction before sunrise. The sun finally peeks over the tiled rooftops and Rome turns from silhouette to painting. You walk past where wine gets served warm and the snacks are questionably legal. But you're headed deeper into the Rome's noisy, fragrant underbelly. Not dangerous exactly, just unfiltered. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, but mostly because you owe someone money or broke their amphora in 83 BCE. You pass a wall plastered in announcements, plays, gladiator events, and oddly well-drawn chicken for sale. One reads, "Beware the baker of the 6th block, his bread is half air." Fair criticism, maybe. Roman bread could be assertively textured. You stop at a small shop with the door propped open by a chunk of marble that once belonged to something religious. Inside, a woman named kneads dough with the steady rhythm of someone who's done it every day for 40 years. Her arms are stronger than most legionaries. She hums a song you don't recognize, probably from the countryside, where the wind still has room to wander. Doesn't talk much, but she gestures to a wooden shelf. There it is, a tiny clay figure of Fornax. She's crude, more emoji than statue, but unmistakable. Round cheeks, a flame rising from her tiny oven-shaped base. Flicks flour at it absent-mindedly. Is it a blessing, a superstition, or just how she cleans her fingers? Hard to say. Roman religion is part worship, part habit, part performance. Scholars still argue whether people believed or simply participated. Then again, belief isn't always about theology. Sometimes it's about hedging your bets before sunrise. You help her shape loaves for the oven. The dough is dense, studded with herbs you don't recognize and olives that look like they've seen things. You wonder how Roman bakers knew when it was done. No timers, no apps, just instinct, scent, and occasionally divine intervention. As a boy bursts in, red-faced and breathless, he waves a chipped plate. Mama says the bread yesterday had a rock in it, nods sagely and says, "Tell your mama that means the gods liked her." The boy squints, unsure if he's been blessed or scammed. He runs off before the answer gets too complicated. You and share a shrug. Bread is hard, life is harder. But the oven's hot and Fornax hasn't cursed you yet, so you keep shaping loaves. As outside, a trumpet sounds, probably announcing something nobody wants to hear. A procession passes by, musicians, priests, a goat who looks like he's not on board with any of this. You spot another baker closing up his shop early. His sign says, "Gone to pray your bread lasts." You sit on the stoop and take a bite of warm crust. It's rough, earthy, and astonishingly satisfying. Maybe it's the olive oil. Maybe it's the mild risk of divine vengeance. Either way, the day has begun. Slowly, sleepily, like dough that just started to rise. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Unless Fornax has other plans. You linger outside's bakery a little longer, half watching the street and half listening to the whisper of the oven behind you. Rome's morning has officially shaken off its fog. The city is awake in all its complicated, clattering glory. Street vendors argue like it's a performance art. A man sells figs that are probably yesterday's figs pretending to be today's. And someone somewhere has already begun reciting poetry to no one in particular, very loudly. You drift into the flow of it all, pulled along like a breadcrumb in a flood. Now, today is the festival of Fornax, and although Rome celebrates it by neighborhood, it's less like a grand city-wide parade and more like a civic bake sale hosted by the gods. If you're in a good district, there might be music. If you're in a bad one, it might end with a food fight and a suspicious fire. Either way, the bread gets blessed. Sort of. You pass by a group of elderly women gossiping with the intensity of senators. They're shaping what looks like ritual dough into tiny loaves, each stamped with their family's mark. You spot the letter S carved into one. That probably stands for, or maybe, sincerely hoping this one doesn't burn. The stamping bread might seem strange, but it's standard Roman fare. Every bakery has a stamp, part trademark, part accountability, part ancient Yelp. If you bite into a loaf and crack a tooth on a pebble, you want to know whose family name to curse. Fair's fair. One woman waves you over. Her name is, she has opinions, most of which are delivered like their gospel. Did you know? She begins with the smugness of someone about to drop historical trivia. The Guild of Bakers used to be protected by the emperor himself. Oh, you nod as if you did, though you didn't. Because, she continues, bread is the soul of the city. No bread, no peace. You think riots start over politics, please, it's always the bread. She gestures with her rolling pin like it's a scepter. She's not wrong. Ancient Rome's grain dole was the original food security program. Citizens got monthly rations, and if the grain boats were late, Rome got loud. There are records of near uprisings when the bread wasn't distributed on time. No eats, just mobs and shouting. Historians still debate whether the Bakers' Guild Collegium truly held imperial favor or if it was more about optics. Either way, bakers were vital, possibly sacred. And Fornax, she was their insurance policy. The goddess you prayed to when your dough looked suspiciously flat. You watch sprinkle sesame seeds on her loaf with a reverence normally reserved for temples. Then she winks. These make the crust crunchy, and the gods like the crunch. You believe her. Because what else could possibly explain this city's obsession with flour and fire? By the streets begin to pulse with festival energy. Not chaotic, just cheerfully unstable. Someone's juggling jugs. Children dash through alleys with arms full of bread offerings, some of which may or may not arrive intact. And every few blocks you hear a priest shout a prayer while trying not to trip on his own robes. You find yourself near the Forum, Rome's oldest market. It's the kind of place where cows once grazed, deals were struck, and now a slightly undercooked bread competition is about to take place. This was not advertised. An announcer steps up onto a wooden crate, clears his throat, and yells, "Let the judging begin." This apparently comes with flair. 4 local bakers stand behind wooden tables, each displaying their best loaves. One has braided a bread crown. Another has sculpted a miniature Colosseum out of rye. One baker simply has a giant round loaf with the words "still warm" stabbed into it with rosemary. The judge is a priest with flour on his sleeves, and the expression of someone who didn't expect this level of commitment. You watch as he tastes each one slowly. The crowd leans forward. You do too. It's oddly suspenseful. When he finally lifts the rosemary loaf in victory, the crowd cheers, not wildly, but with a sort of collective exhale. Even Rome knows how to be modestly festive. As afterward, the winning baker, a young man named bows with theatrical seriousness. "For Fornax," he says, placing the loaf on a small altar with a flickering candle. It's oddly moving in the way that small gestures often are. You move through the crowd, catching snippets of conversation. "Did you see the crust on that barley loaf? Divine." "Fornax favors the bold." "I think mine was better, but I respect the rosemary." Eventually, you find a shaded spot beneath an overhang where a group is being quizzed by their tutor. He points to the sun and asks, "What time should bread be taken from the oven?" A small girl answers, "When the gods stop laughing." You pretend not to smile, but it's clever and probably accurate. One of the most obscure beliefs among Roman bakers was that laughter could spoil the dough if it rose during thunderstorms. Why? No one really knows. Scholars assume it had to do with pressure or moisture, or maybe just nervous superstition passed down like a family recipe. But the fear was real. Laugh too loud and your bread might fall flat, along with your social standing. You sit a while longer, eyes half closed as the crowd disperses. Sunlight flickers through the awning above like light through a sieve. The priest packs up the altar. Someone hands out small pieces of warm bread too. You accept one. Still warm, still fragrant. Still worthy of a goddess if she happens to be in the mood. Now back on your feet, you begin your slow walk home. Past the same walls, past the gossiping elders, past the bakery where is already planning tomorrow's dough. And somewhere in the folds of the city, Fornax watches. Maybe amused, maybe hungry. Either way, you leave a few crumbs behind, just in case she's listening. The walk back takes you along quieter streets now, still part of Rome, yes, but softened. The clamor of the festival fades like a dream you almost remember. Birds roost in crumbling niches. Laundry flaps above like sleepy flags. And in the distance, a lyre plays from a window far too high up for such perfect acoustics. You pass a man balancing 3 baskets of bread on his head like it's the most natural hat in the world. He nods to you not because he knows you, but because today, everyone is slightly friendlier. Flour makes philosophers of us all, apparently. As you turn a corner, you're nearly run over by a donkey. Not an especially fast donkey, but one who clearly believes he has right of way. His cart rattles with sacks of spelt and a sign that reads, "Property of the Guild of Bakers, do not kick." Fair enough. You pause outside a smaller shrine, this one dedicated to Vesta, goddess of the hearth. She's a cousin, thematically speaking, to Fornax. Less about ovens and more about the eternal flame. A woman in a simple tunic is kneeling there, whispering a prayer while holding a slightly squished loaf. This is Rome's charm. Gods for everything, rituals for anything, and a quiet insistence that bread might just hold the universe together. The woman notices you watching and smiles. "It's for my husband," she explains. "He delivers firewood. I thought a sacred loaf might keep his cart from tipping." "Oh, does it work?" you ask. She shrugs. "Well, he hasn't crashed yet. But he did come home with someone else's goat last week." Ah yes, divine ambiguity, the cornerstone of all Roman faiths. Historians still debate how much of Roman religion was deeply believed versus how much was performative. But you suspect the truth, as always, lies in the middle. People believed because belief made things feel less random. A bad harvest wasn't just bad luck. It was a missed offering, a skipped prayer, a goddess waiting for attention. You carry that thought with you as you walk past one of the larger. This one's bustling, 3 men working the ovens in shifts, a teenager stamping each loaf with the bakery's mark, a stylized fish, probably symbolic, possibly just lunch-related. You catch a whiff of burnt crust and honey. And curiously, ashes. You step closer and notice one of the bakers tossing small amounts of ash into the dough bin. You raise an eyebrow. "Oh," he laughs, "family tradition," he says. "A pinch of sacred fire ash makes the bread lucky." "How does it?" "No idea, but the superstition smells oddly comforting." You take another step and the teenager hands you a small heel of bread still steaming. "For Fornax," he says, and then grinning adds, "Also, we made too much." You walk away chewing something that tastes like smoke and honey, and maybe a bit of divine neglect. And it's perfect. Later in the day, the light softens. Rome becomes golden, like a city dipped in olive oil. You make your way toward the hill, where things are quieter, wealthier, yes, but also moodier. Up here, even the breeze seems educated. You walk past villas with ivy climbing their facades, each window glowing like a secret. Somewhere someone's playing pipes. Somewhere else a debate is happening about whether figs should be boiled or grilled. Probably both. Possibly neither. Opinions, like olives, are abundant in Rome. You find yourself in a small courtyard garden. It doesn't belong to you, but Roman architecture has this delightful flaw where public and private blur. So you sit. There's a bench, some rosemary, and a statue of Fornax so elegant you almost mistake her for Vesta. She's carved mid-motion, holding what looks like a pizza peel in one hand and a loaf in the other. Her expression says, "You forgot to preheat the oven again, didn't you?" This version of Fornax is more idealized than doughy figurine. She's taller, less smudged, probably doesn't smell like burnt sesame seeds, but both are sacred in their own way. An older man joins you on the bench, uninvited but not unwelcome. He has the relaxed posture of someone who no longer fears embarrassment or taxes. "Are you here for the stories?" he asks. You nod. He points to the statue. My mother told me Fornax was the goddess who invented sourdough, left dough out too long and called it miracle rising. He chuckles. She also said that if you cursed while baking, your bread would collapse from shame. While you smile sounds accurate. He shrugs. Every Roman house has its own legend. That's how gods stay alive. Not through temples, but through stories whispered in kitchens. Well, then he offers you a fig. Now you accept it because, frankly, you're in Rome and someone just handed you a fig. And as the sun dips lower, casting shadows long and dramatic enough to impress even a senator, the old man rises. If you're still curious, he says, visit the Temple of Concord tomorrow. They say the bakers used to meet there once upon a time. When the city needed peace, they made pastries. He leaves with a nod, disappearing down the marble path like a character exiting a play just before the final act. While you lean back on the bench and stare at the statue again. And for a moment, just a moment, you think the stone Fornax might be smiling too. Or maybe it's just the fig talking. Now the evening settles in slow and drowsy. Rome exhales. Night arrives dressed in velvet. Rome doesn't quiet down so much as soften. You pass a bathhouse still glowing from within, steam pouring out like the breath of an old god. Someone inside laughs. It echoes too big for one voice. Oh, you're not here to bathe, though. You're here for another story. As at the edge of the district, you find a tiny nestled behind overgrown vines. The door creaks as you push it open, and inside, a man with ink-stained fingers looks up from a scroll. Oh, he gestures to the bench across from him without a word. You sit. The room smells like dried figs and old parchment, cozy and a little academic. A cat purrs loudly in the corner, having claimed a cushion with scholarly authority. You want to know about the guild, the man finally says, adjusting his tunic with a rustle. The collegium was more than a union, it was survival. While you nod, waiting. The membership meant protection, he continues. It meant a voice. It meant your family could keep baking even when flour prices rose, or when the Senate decided everyone should fast for a week because Mars sneezed. He says this last part with a dry smile. Of course, he adds, not all bakers were equal. Some were slaves. Some were freedmen. Some owned vast bakeries, while others could barely keep their ovens lit. You ask, did Fornax protect them all? He leans back and shrugs. Depends who you ask. Some thought Fornax favored the poor. Others believed she blessed whoever left the biggest loaf at her altar. Which is true. He smiles again. That's the thing with Roman gods. They're like cats. They do as they please. The cat meows, possibly in agreement. The man returns to his scroll. We have records of a guild leader petitioning the Senate once, asking for more grain, citing divine neglect. Can you imagine blaming a goddess for bad delivery schedules? Well, you can. You absolutely can. You leave quietly, stepping back into the warm Roman dark. The cat watches you go like it's judging your taste in sandals. And above, somewhere between smoke and starlight, you wonder if Fornax really does watch over every loaf. Oh, even the slightly burnt ones. Especially those. You find yourself wandering down a path lit by lanterns hung from iron hooks, their glow soft and buttery, casting long sleepy shadows against the stone walls. Rome at night is less grand and more secretive, less marble, more murmurs. You're headed now toward the campus, where the city sprawls a little more freely. The streets widen, the chatter thins. It smells like damp earth, old citrus peels, and the distant trace of roasting chestnuts. There's a small stall tucked against a temple wall, where an old woman with an apron stiff with flour sells, a type of Roman cheesecake. She says it was once an offering to household gods, but now it's mostly for people who forgot dinner. You buy one, not because you're hungry, but because ancient cheesecake feels like something Fornax might endorse. She smiles, made with goat cheese, honey, and piety. You raise an eyebrow, piety. She lines in, well, I did say a prayer while it baked. The cheesecake is warm, crumbly, slightly sour in a good way, like a dessert with opinions. As you sit on the temple steps and eat it slowly, the woman tells you a story. There used to be a bakery here, she says, gesturing vaguely at a column. Long ago, before the fire. What fire? She shrugs one of them. Rome and fire have a long, complicated relationship. The city has burned more times than it has rebuilt itself. And every time it does, someone always blames a god, a politician, or a baker with bad luck. And after that fire, she says, the bakers formed circles, shared ovens, prayed harder, lit candles before every batch. Did it help? Not with the fires, she admits, but the bread got better. Historians still debate whether such post-fire rituals were real or romanticized. But there's something comforting about the idea that after smoke and ruin, people returned to flour and flame and tried again. You finish the last bite, brushing crumbs from your lap. The temple behind you looms large, but its doors are closed. The gods are sleeping, maybe. But the ovens still glow. Farther into the campus, you pass a cluster of small houses lit from within by flickering lamps. Through one window, you glimpse a family laughing over dinner. Bread, stew, maybe a little wine. You can't hear what they're saying, but you recognize the shape of joy. Not far from them is a humble shrine, just a carved niche with a soot-darkened figurine inside, Fornax again. This one barely resembles a human figure at all, just a lump with fire etched on its chest. But there's a fresh crust of bread resting in front of it, still steaming. You stand there for a while, listening to the soft crackle of a nearby hearth, to a baby's hiccup through a window, to a dog sneezing in its sleep. And you start to understand something. For Romans, gods weren't always grand. Sometimes they lived in cupboards. Sometimes they took the shape of worn figurines. Sometimes they were invoked not with gold or sacrifice, but with dough. You think back to the teenager stamping loaves, to the priest who crowned the rosemary bread. Every one of them, whether or not they believed in Fornax as a being, believed in the ritual of bread, in the rhythm of flame and flour, in the invisible comfort that something sacred might rise, even if just for a moment, inside a crumbling oven. As you continue your walk, you pass a baker's cart being pulled home for the night. Empty trays, a few crumbs, and a single unbaked loaf resting in the corner. The baker catches your eye. Saving that one, he says, for the morning batch. It'll rise overnight, better flavor. You nod, you already know, you've seen it happen, you've felt it. How something humble becomes holy when it waits. He disappears into the dark, and you're left alone beneath the stars. The air is cooler now, the city quieter. A gentle hush settling across the rooftops like a warm linen cloths. And somewhere nearby, in a still glowing oven, Fornax is being honored the only way she ever asked. With patience, with flour, and with just the right amount of heat. The heat thins. The sky turns the color of old parchment inked with fatting charcoal. You wander back toward the river where voices echo softer, gentler. Traders haul in the last of their goods. A flute plays somewhere nearby, as if the day itself decided to hum a lullaby. You stop by a riverside stall, a small table stacked with old loaves too stale for the rich but perfect for pigeons, soldiers, or stories. The man behind the table wears a cloak that has seen better centuries. His beard suggests he once wrestled a lion, possibly by accident. He gestures to the bread and says, "These were baked with ash from the Vestal fire, or maybe just someone's fireplace. Who can say?" You buy one anyway, not because you believe it, but because Rome makes you want to believe it. He continues, "My father said in the old days, bakers didn't just bake. They translated dreams." You raise an eyebrow. They believed that if you dreamed of rising dough, it meant good fortune. But if you dreamed of burnt crust, you'd be betrayed by a friend. You nod slowly, that's specific. He winks, so are Romans. Historians, of course, are skeptical about such dream lore. There's little solid documentation on what dreams meant to the average Roman baker. But absence of evidence doesn't cancel out whispered tradition. After all, how do you archive a superstition passed down with a wink? As you chew your questionable crust, you watch a group of boys skip rocks across the Tiber. They cheer for each bounce like it's a gladiator's final blow. Behind them, the city flickers with torches, and you sit on a worn stone ledge, feet dangling just above the water, and feel for just a moment like a citizen of something timeless. A rhythm of bread and river and dusk. And maybe that's enough to count as faiths. What if you woke up tomorrow to find your entire town, your friends, your family, your neighbors, completely gone, no warning, no explanation, just vanished without a trace? How would you react? What would you do? Stay with us, because tonight we're diving into the chilling stories of 3 towns that disappeared overnight. And trust me, once you hear these, you'll never look at you're the same way again. Welcome to a world where entire towns can vanish into thin air, leaving nothing behind but questions and fear. In tonight's stories, we'll explore the eerie and unexplainable disappearances of three towns that seem to simply erase themselves from history. From strange glowing stones to the chilling whispers of ancient curses, these vanishings will leave you wondering, what if it happens again? Make sure to stay till the end because these tales of terror are ones you won't forget. Was a small, charming village tucked away in the foothills of a mountain range. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone and secrets were as rare as snow in summer. Founded in the 1800s by a group of settlers looking for a fresh start, had grown slowly but steadily over the years. By the time it reached the 1950s, it was a thriving community, complete with a school, a couple of small shops, a post office, and even a little diner. The people there were friendly and proud of the land they called home. Nothing about stood out to outsiders. It was just another small, peaceful town in the heart of the country. But it had a history, one that the people of were hesitant to talk about. The town had long been surrounded by rumors. The elders often spoke in hushed tones about strange occurrences in the area, things that happened long before the town was established. Some of them swore that the land had been cursed from the very beginning, while others talked about strange lights that flickered in the sky at night, or the eerie sounds that echoed through the hills on calm, moonless nights. But these were just stories, old legends passed down over generations. As the town grew, people moved on with their lives and those stories were slowly forgotten. That is, until the night it all changed. It started with a strange fog. Thick, almost suffocating, it crept down from the mountains one evening, coating the town in an unsettling haze. The townsfolk didn't think much of it at first. Fog was a natural occurrence in the mountains, especially as the weather started to cool. But this fog felt different, heavier, denser, and it lasted far longer than usual. It hung over for days, casting an oppressive gloom over the town. The people went about their daily lives, but there was an underlying tension that no one could shake. The air felt wrong, and even the most mundane tasks, working in the garden, walking down the street, felt eerie as though something was watching. Then, on the fifth day of the fog, it happened. People began to notice that something was missing. It started with small things. A neighbor who never showed up to work, a child who didn't come home from school. Then entire families vanished without a trace. At first, no one thought much of it. People assumed they had just left the town, moved away without telling anyone. But as more and more people disappeared, panic began to set in. The local police were called, but when they arrived, they found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no tracks, no signs of any sort of violence. It was as though people had simply disappeared into thin air. No one had seen anyone leave. It was as if they were taken in the dead of night without even a sound. Their homes remained untouched, lights still flickered, food was left half-eaten, clothes remained folded neatly on beds. The only clue, the thick fog that seemed to have settled deeper over the town. As the hours passed and more people vanished, the town fell into chaos. A group of residents gathered at the town hall trying to make sense of what was happening. But the fog was thick now, almost suffocating, and no one could think straight. Panic spread through the group. People shouted, asking where their families had gone, but no one had any answers. The fear was palpable, and in their confusion, some people even began accusing each other of being involved in whatever was happening. Then something even stranger occurred. The air began to grow colder, a biting chill that couldn't be explained. As the night fell, the fog seemed to close in even, and a low, distant hum filled the air, a sound so deep and strange it made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. The sound came from the direction of the old cemetery at the edge of town, a place no one dared to visit after dark. The hum grew louder, then stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. By morning, the entire town had vanished. There was no sign of anyone. The houses were empty, the streets deserted. The fog remained thick and choking, but the people were gone. Even the animals had disappeared. There was no movement, no life. It was as though had never existed at all. When authorities from neighboring towns arrived to investigate, they found the town in ruins. Was an empty shell of what it had once been. The houses, the shops, even the town hall stood abandoned as though time had stopped for them. The air still held that unnatural chill, and the hum, which now seemed like a faint echo, could still be heard on the wind. The town's history, its people, its very existence had been erased as if it had been swallowed by the earth itself. Despite extensive investigations, no one was ever able to explain what had happened to. There were theories, of course. Some said the land had been cursed and the town was simply the latest victim. Others believed it was an experiment gone wrong, a government cover-up that had left an entire town erased from the map. But no one knew for sure. The fog never returned, but the town remained abandoned, left to decay. Years passed and the story faded into local legend, told in whispers around campfires and in dark corners of the town's bars. But those who remember speak of a strange unease that still lingers in the area. Some say that if you visit at night, you can still hear the hum, and if you listen closely enough, you might just catch a glimpse of something, someone still trapped in the fog. They say that if you walk the streets you might feel the presence of the missing townsfolk watching you just out of sight. And the most chilling part of all, some believe the town is still out there, hidden beneath the fog, waiting for someone else to find it. Waiting for the next chapter in its dark, mysterious history to unfold. But who would be foolish enough to seek it out? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain, will never be the same, and neither will anyone who dares to step foot on its cursed soil. The town was as quiet and unassuming as any small mining community in the Midwest. Established in the late 1800s during the peak of the gold rush, it had grown into a modest town, nestled into the side of a mountain, where the air was crisp and the work was tough. The residents were tough as well, miners, farmers, shop owners, all living simple lives in a place where everyone knew each other. The town was small, but it had its own unique charm, tucked away in a valley, surrounded by dense forests and jagged rocks that seemed to protect it from the outside world. The town itself was far from the busy cities, and its isolation gave it a sense of security. The people who lived there were proud of their town, and the decades of hard work had shaped a community that was as reliable as the sturdy mountains around them. Despite the town's simplicity, there were always whispers. Whispers about strange occurrences that no one could fully explain. Old-timers spoke of an unusual discovery in the nearby mountains, something hidden deep beneath the earth. Some said the miners who had come to the area in the early days had unearthed something mysterious, something ancient. The town had its fair share of disappearances over the years, mining accidents, lost souls, unexplained deaths, but no one ever paid much attention to the old stories. It was just part of life in a small mining town where people worked hard and life was harsh. But that all changed one night in 1967. It began with a strange noise echoing through the hills. No one could quite place it, but the sound was deep and vibrating, almost like a distant rumble or hum, as though something beneath the ground was shifting. The noise came and went sporadically, lingering for days, but no one thought much of it at first. After all, there had been odd noises in the mountains before, whispers in the wind, shifting rocks, and the occasional creak from deep within the earth. But this was different. It was an unnatural sound, low and resonant, vibrating the very ground beneath the town. It made the hairs on the back of people's necks stand on end. On the night of October 17th, everything changed. The town's lights flickered, dimmed, and then went out altogether. The electric grid had failed, a common enough occurrence in a small town but this time something felt off. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a single sound could be heard from the usually busy town. The streets were eerily still, and not a single light flickered from any window or porch. The residents who had been awake that night described feeling a heavy weight in the air, a pressure that seemed to suffocate them. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the hum returned. Louder this time. But now it wasn't coming from the hills, it was coming from beneath the town itself. People in their homes were too terrified to move. A few brave souls gathered outside, searching for any explanation. They didn't see anything unusual, but the sense of dread in the air was palpable. Something was coming, something that they couldn't quite understand. By midnight, the sound grew deafening. It vibrated through the ground, rattling windows and shaking the walls. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. Dead silence. It was as though the world had gone still. In the hours that followed, everything seemed to change. The morning sun came up, but the town was silent. The usual hum of activity, the sounds of trucks, the clatter of hammers, the bustle of town life was gone. There were no voices, no birds, no dogs barking. The town felt completely empty. People began looking for their neighbors, knocking on doors and calling out names, but when they went inside, they found the homes empty. Not a trace of anyone. The beds were untouched. The food was still on the tables. Personal belongings were scattered around the houses, as though the residents had simply stepped out, leaving behind everything they owned. The police arrived shortly after the disappearance, but they were just as baffled. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no evidence of anything unusual. The only thing they found were strange marks on the ground, large, circular impressions like something massive had been dragged across the town. But they couldn't explain how or why the town had been completely emptied. It was as though every person, every animal had just evaporated into thin air. The search for missing residents lasted for weeks. Teams of investigators combed through the mountains, searching for any clues, any signs of where the people had gone, but the land was empty. The surrounding forests were eerily quiet, with no animals or wildlife to be found. The town was completely deserted, with not a single footprint or clue to suggest where the people had gone. It was as though they had all vanished, as if erased from the world entirely. And then, just as suddenly as it had happened, the noise stopped. The ground grew still again, and the town was left in an eerie, unsettling silence. But the people of and the mysteries surrounding their disappearance were never seen again. Some say that the townspeople are still out there, trapped in another dimension, waiting for someone to find them. Others believe that they were taken by something beneath the earth, an ancient force that had been awakened by the mining operations that had been ongoing in the area. But no one can say for sure. The town of remains abandoned to this day. The buildings, the streets, the homes, everything stands as it was left, frozen in time. It is a place where no one dares to enter and no one dares to speak of. It is as though the town has been forgotten by the world, left to decay in silence. Occasionally, some people report strange occurrences near the town, flickering lights in the distance, strange figures moving in the shadows. Some say that if you get close enough you can hear a low hum in the air, just like the one that started it all. But no one has ever been brave enough to venture in. The mystery of remains unsolved, and the people who vanished that night are still a part of the town's dark history, forever lost to time. No one knows what truly happened that night. Was it a natural disaster, a government experiment gone wrong, or something far darker? All we have are the eerie, unanswered questions and the chilling silence that still hangs over. The town was as quiet and unassuming as any small mining community in the Midwest. Established in the late 1800s during the peak of the gold rush, it had grown into a modest but town nestled into the side of a mountain where the air was crisp and the work was tough. The residents of were tough as well, miners, farmers, shop owners, all living simple lives in a place where everyone knew each other. The town was small, but it had its own unique charm, tucked away in a valley, surrounded by dense forests and jagged rocks that seemed to protect it from the outside world. The town itself was far from the busy cities, and its isolation gave it a sense of security. The people who lived there were proud of their town, and the decades of hard work had shaped a community that was as reliable as the sturdy mountains around them. Despite the town's simplicity, there were always whispers. Whispers about strange occurrences that no one could fully explain. Old-timers spoke of an unusual discovery in the nearby mountains, something hidden deep beneath the earth. Some said the miners who had come to the area in the early days had unearthed something mysterious, something ancient. The town had its fair share of disappearances over the years, mining accidents, lost souls, unexplained deaths, but no one ever paid much attention to the old stories. It was just part of life in a small mining town where people worked hard and life was harsh. But that all changed one night in 1967. It began with a strange noise echoing through the hills. No one could quite place it, but the sound was deep and vibrating, almost like a distant rumble or hum, as though something beneath the ground was shifting. The noise came and went sporadically, lingering for days, but no one thought much of it at first. After all, there had been odd noises in the mountains before, whispers in the wind, shifting rocks, and the occasional creak from deep within the earth. But this was different. It was an unnatural sound, low and resonant, vibrating the very ground beneath the town. It made the hairs on the back of people's necks stand on end. On the night of October 17th, everything changed. The town's lights flickered, dimmed, and then went out altogether. The electric grid had failed, a common enough occurrence in a small town but this time something felt off. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a single sound could be heard from the usually busy town. The streets were eerily still, and not a single light flickered from any window or porch. The residents who had been awake that night described feeling a heavy weight in the air, a pressure that seemed to suffocate them. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the hum returned. Louder this time, but now it wasn't coming from the hills, it was coming from beneath the town itself. People in their homes were too terrified to move. A few brave souls gathered outside, searching for any explanation. They didn't see anything unusual, but the sense of dread in the air was palpable. Something was coming, something that they couldn't quite understand. By midnight, the sound grew deafening. It vibrated through the ground, rattling windows and shaking the walls. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. Dead silence. It was as though the world had gone still. In the hours that followed, everything seemed to change. The morning sun came up, but the town was silent. The usual hum of activity, the sounds of trucks, the clatter of hammers, the bustle of town life was gone. There were no voices, no birds, no dogs barking. The town felt completely empty. People began looking for their neighbors, knocking on doors and calling out names, but when they went inside, they found the homes empty. Not a trace of anyone. The beds were untouched. The food was still on the tables. Personal belongings were scattered around the houses, as though the residents had simply stepped out, leaving behind everything they owned. The police arrived shortly after the disappearance, but they were just as baffled. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no evidence of anything unusual. The only thing they found were strange marks on the ground, large, circular impressions like something massive had been dragged across the town. But they couldn't explain how or why the town had been completely emptied. It was as though every person, every animal had just evaporated into thin air. The search for missing residents lasted for weeks. Teams of investigators combed through the mountains, searching for any clues, any signs of where the people had gone, but the land was empty. The surrounding forests were eerily quiet, with no animals or wildlife to be found. The town was completely deserted, with not a single footprint or clue to suggest where the people had gone. It was as though they had all vanished, as if erased from the world entirely. And then, just as suddenly as it had happened, the noise stopped. The ground grew still again, and the town was left in an eerie, unsettling silence. But the people of and the mysteries surrounding their disappearance were never seen again. Some say that the town's people are still out there, trapped in another dimension, waiting for someone to find them. Others believe that they were taken by something beneath the earth, an ancient force that had been awakened by the mining operations that had been ongoing in the area. But no one can say for sure. The town of remains abandoned to this day. The buildings, the streets, the homes, everything stands as it was left, frozen in time. It is a place where no one dares to enter and no one dares to speak of. It is as though the town has been forgotten by the world, left to decay in silence. Occasionally, some people report strange occurrences near the town, flickering lights in the distance, strange figures moving in the shadows. Some say that if you get close enough you can hear a low hum in the air, just like the one that started it all. But no one has ever been brave enough to venture in. The mystery of remains unsolved, and the people who vanished that night are still a part of the town's dark history, forever lost to time. No one knows what truly happened that night. Was it a natural disaster, a government experiment gone wrong, or something far darker? All we have are the eerie, unanswered questions and the chilling silence that still hangs over. Was a coastal town like no other, nestled along the rugged cliffs of a quiet, isolated coastline. It was a place where the salt air mingled with the scent of pine, where the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was both soothing and wild. The town had a rich history that stretched back centuries, founded by settlers who were drawn to the area's beauty and abundance of natural resources. As the years passed, it became a popular destination for tourists, who came to enjoy its pristine beaches, quaint inns, and the idyllic charm of its narrow, cobblestone streets. The town's old-world appeal made it a perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of city life, and soon it became known for its peaceful atmosphere and tight-knit community. Despite the calm facade, however, had always been surrounded by strange whispers, odd stories that locals were quick to dismiss. They spoke of the tides, which seemed to rise higher than expected at times, of a hidden cave system beneath the town, and of strange lights seen in the sky by fishermen late at night. But most people shrugged these off as local legends, the stuff of folklore meant to stir excitement among visitors, not to be taken seriously. Life was simple, and the people who lived there had no interest in dwelling on old rumors. They were more concerned with the tides, the harvest, and the needs of the community. Everything was predictable, even in its mysteries. That was until the night it all changed. It began on the night of the annual festival. It was a cool autumn evening, and the entire town gathered in the town square to celebrate, enjoy food, dance, and revel in the joy of community. The festival was always a highlight of the year, bringing everyone together in a celebration of the harvest and the town's heritage. Music filled the air, laughter echoed in every corner, and families gathered beneath the string lights that hung between the buildings. The sense of normalcy was thick, as though nothing could disturb the peace of this coastal haven. Yet, underneath the merriment, a subtle, unshakable tension began to build. At exactly midnight, the entire town fell silent. It wasn't gradual, but instantaneous, a sudden, profound stillness that took over the streets. The music stopped, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment the very air seemed to thicken, holding its breath. Then, as if on cue, the festival-goers began to look around in confusion. People glanced at one another as if they had just woken up from some collective dream. The joy, the warmth, the energy, all of it seemed to evaporate in an instant. And then it happened. One by one, people began to vanish. They weren't taken, they didn't scream or struggle. No, they simply disappeared. The first to go was a young couple and Jack, who were dancing near the fountain. One moment they were laughing, and the next they were gone, vanished, leaving only the empty space between the cobblestones where they had stood. Their friends called out for them, but there was no answer. They weren't there anymore. Their belongings, jackets, phones, and even their shoes were found scattered on the ground, as if they had just evaporated into the night. Panic spread quickly as more and more people disappeared. The entire town seemed to freeze, as if time itself had stopped. Parents screamed for their children, but there was no response. People rushed into the streets looking for any sign of their missing loved ones, but the roads were eerily empty. No one could explain what was happening. It was as though the town was being erased from existence, one person at a time. By the time the authorities arrived, it was too late. The streets were empty, not a single person remained. The town square, once full of life, was silent. There was no sign of a struggle, no bloodshed, no destruction, just emptiness. The festival decorations still hung from the buildings, but the energy that had once filled the town was gone, and so were the people. The authorities conducted an exhaustive search. They combed through every inch of the town and the surrounding forest. They searched the cliffs, the beaches, the caves hidden beneath the town. But there was no sign of anyone, no trace, no footprints, no clues. It was as if the entire population had simply evaporated, leaving behind nothing but their abandoned homes and a town frozen in time. In the days that followed, rumors began to swirl. Some believed the town had been cursed, that the land itself had claimed its inhabitants as punishment for something the town had done long ago. Others speculated that it had something to do with the mysterious lights seen over the ocean in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. Were they a warning, a sign that something otherworldly had taken the town? Theories abounded, but none could explain the eerie silence that had replaced its once bustling streets. As the search continued, the few people who ventured close to reported strange occurrences. Some claimed to hear the faint sound of music in the distance or voices whispering on the wind. Others reported seeing figures moving in the windows of the empty houses, shadows that seemed to watch from behind curtains only to disappear when they were approached. The air near seemed thick, oppressive, like something was still lingering in the town, waiting. Years passed and remained abandoned. The town's story was gradually forgotten, relegated to the realm of urban legends and ghost stories. But occasionally someone would wander too close to the old town, only to return with unsettling tales of flickering lights in the distance, or of hearing laughter and voices in the night just beyond the tree line. A few brave souls even claimed to have seen figures standing by the beach, staring out at the horizon, waiting for something. But when they looked again, the figures were gone, vanished like the rest of the town. And the most chilling part, no one knows what really happened to. Was it a mass disappearance, a supernatural event, or was it something far darker, something hidden beneath the town that caused it to disappear? The questions remain unanswered, and the town is left to decay, its streets silent, its secrets buried beneath the waves. No one knows if the people will ever return, if they're still out there waiting in the shadows, or if they're lost forever. But one thing is certain, the story is far from over. If you listen closely, you might still hear the music. You might still hear the laughter. But don't go looking for it because some places are better left forgotten. Some towns are best left alone. As the mystery of lingers, one thing is certain. Some towns are better left forgotten and some stories are too unsettling to be explained. The people of May have vanished, but their story lives on, shrouded in darkness and unanswered questions. What happened to them? And what really lies beneath the town? If you've been captivated by this eerie tale, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more chilling stories like this one. We've got plenty more unexplained mysteries, terrifying disappearances, and haunting legends waiting for you. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you're always the first to hear the next spine-tingling story. Until then, stay safe and remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved. You wander down a narrow lane now, a little crooked, a little damp. The kind of path you wouldn't notice in daylight, but that feels magnetic under moonlight. It bends unexpectedly and ends in a tiny square no bigger than a modern parking space. At its center stands a column no taller than your shoulder. Not marble, not bronze, just old brick stacked and mortared with a kind of quiet stubbornness. At the top sits a loaf. Not a real one, but carved from stones. The faded words circle the base. I remember bread. A sleepy cat is curled beneath the monument, undisturbed by your presence. A man nearby sells tiny scrolls of poetry from a basket, but he doesn't speak, just smiles and nods. You take one. It smells faintly of time. Though the poem inside is short. We offered loaves to fire and gods, but only the hungry remembered. You fold it carefully and tuck it away. You ask an older woman sitting nearby what the monument is for. Ah, she says, that's for the bread we forgot to be grateful for. You blink, is that a real thing? She shrugs, it is now. As apparently, the column was placed here only a few decades ago by someone who'd lost their bakery in a flood. They built the pillar from ruined bricks, sculpted the loaf, and whispered thanks to no one in particular. Since then, people have started calling it the Forgotten Loaf. Some visit to say prayers, others to remember names. Some just leave crumbs for the birds. Historians don't recognize it as an official site. But the pigeons clearly do. You sit a moment longer, watching shadows stretch toward the base of the loaf. In Rome, even the smallest stone can become sacred, especially when bread is involved. Your next stop isn't a stop so much as a pause, an open courtyard, unusually empty for Rome. No vendors, no priests, just ivy crawling up old columns and the sound of your own breath. In the center stands a sundial long since cracked, its gnomon missing. Around the edges are inscriptions, most weathered into oblivion, but one remains. Time bakes all things. You laugh softly, it's true in more ways than one. As a man walks by with a bundle of firewood. He sets it down beside the courtyard's edge, pulls out a crusty loaf from his tunic and breaks off a piece. Before he eats, he looks toward the sundial and nods. Fornax sees time, he mutters mostly to himself. You approach. He's a baker's assistant, he tells you, works the night shift, sleeps during daylight. My dreams smell like rye, he says with a grin. He believes the sundial once belonged to a bakery guild, a way to track oven times by sunlight. No clocks, no alarms, just shadow and gut instinct. Did it work? He shrugs, it did until it didn't. You both laugh, because that sounds like most things in life. He offers you a piece of his loaf. It's tough, slightly overbaked, and utterly sincere. As you chew, he tells you about his master, a woman named who insists on singing to her dough, not sweetly, just tuneless humming, claims it helps the yeast wake up properly. Does it? He smiles, the bread rises, doesn't it? Roman baking, you realize, is less science than symphony. The rhythm of routine, the pulse of hope, the trust in transformation. You thank him and rise to leave. Don't rush, he says, let it rise. It takes you a moment to realize he means more than bread. So you walk slower. Because rising can't be forced. Especially in Rome. The evening deepens now, slipping into that shadowy softness that blurs stone edges and hushes voices. The lamps are lit, oil and flame, flickering against stucco walls like the city is remembering how to breathe slowly. You meander toward the Forum, Rome's ancient vegetable market, now mostly quiet. A few figs remain unsold. Some spilled lentils scatter like forgotten coins. Near the edge of the square, you find a weathered mural, painted straight onto plaster, faded to the color of old tea. It shows a procession, bakers carrying loaves on trays like offerings, led by a woman in flame-colored robes. She holds a paddle, and behind her the oven glows like a second sun. A Fornax, unmistakably. As a man polishing apples nearby notices your gaze. Painted by a baker's widow, he tells you. She said the goddess kept her husband alive for 5 winters longer than the doctors predicted. You nod, do you believe that? He shrugs, I believe she loved him. And sometimes that's enough to make a story true. The mural is rough, not a masterpiece, but it vibrates with something warmer than paint. Memory, maybe, or gratitude kneaded into pigment. There's a small bench nearby, stone, as always, and carved into it are a set of initials, clearly added later. At the very end, a tiny loaf. Even here, bread leaves its mark. Yusa said, Rome doesn't always offer rest, but it offers pauses. Sacred little spaces where time thins and breath deepens. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the wind as it threads through fig crates and broken columns. Behind your eyelids, the painted oven glows. Still warm. Still rising. When you open your eyes, a man is sitting beside you. He's older, wrapped in a tunic that's more patch than cloth. His face is half hidden by a hood, but his smile is clear. You've seen her, he says softly. You nod, though you're not sure which her he means. Fornax, he confirms. She's everywhere if you know where to look. He taps his walking stick against the stone beneath you. This plaza once had 5 ovens, one for each neighborhood. They shared them, took turns, argued, made up, shared recipes, forgot them. And you remember, you ask. He smiles wider. Someone has to. He calls himself a guardian of crumbs. Self-appointed, clearly, but he recites names and dates with unsettling precision. Did you know, he says, that during the drought of 92, one baker used wine instead of water in his dough? Claimed it made the crust sing. Did it? Well, maybe he was just drunk. Historians can't agree. He laughs, an echo of something fuller. You ask what he believes Fornax really was. He considers a goddess maybe, or maybe just the warmth that stays after the fire goes out, the feeling that something will feed you again. He pulls a small crust from his pocket. I always keep one, for luck, for memory, for the birds. He breaks it in 2 and hands you a piece. You eat it, even though it's dry and nearly fossilized. And it tastes like something sacred. Not because it's good, but because it was shared. As he stands to leave, he pats your shoulder. Keep walking, she likes people who linger. And then he's gone, swallowed by shadow like he never sat down at all. You stay on the bench a little longer. Listening. Waiting. Just in case. You follow a path lit by fewer lamps now. Just the soft glimmer of windows and the occasional candle left to flicker beside a doorway. Rome breathes in silence, holding its stories close, like a baker guarding a secret recipe. You walk past what remains of a bakery school, just a low wall and the ghost of a doorway. A child's chalk drawing of a loaf decorates the stones. Beside it, someone scrawled a message. Bake like someone's watching. You step over it gently, as if the chalk were still wet. Beyond the ruins, you find a gathering. Not formal, not planned, just a circle of people seated on cushions and crates around a fire pit. A few are holding loaves, others mugs of something warm. The flame crackles like it's telling its own version of history. A woman with silver-streaked hair speaks as you arrive. In my grandmother's house, she says, they believed if the bread split open too wide, it meant the gods were angry. So she'd bake a second loaf just in case. There are nods, chuckles. So someone adds, mine used to say if your crust made a sound when it cooled, the house would be safe for another day. So superstition, yes, but the kind that comes wrapped in comfort. They pass you a piece of bread, dense, herbed, still warm at the core. So the woman turns to you. What did your family say about bread? You pause and realize for the first time you're not sure. Maybe that's why you're here, why you've walked so far, to learn the stories others already carry. To borrow a superstition until you can make your own. You chew quietly and the fire flickers. Someone begins to hum. The circle leans inward not physically but spiritually, as if pulled by warmth, by story, by a hunger that is quite hunger. Rome feeds more than bodies. Tonight it's feeding memory. Eventually the circle breaks. People drift off in pairs, in silence, in gentle laughter. You walk alone again past shuttered windows and curled vines. And then, unexpectedly, you arrive at the river. Now the Tiber moves slowly tonight, like dough rising in reverse. Reflections shimmer. The moon dances over the water with surprising grace, given her reputation for stirring up madness and sea tides. You lean on the stone wall and exhale, not because you're tired, but because the moment asks for it. Nearby, a small wooden boat is tied to the bank. A man sits at the bow with a lantern and a large basket beside him. Midnight bread delivery, he says, noticing your stare. Hospitals, watchmen, temples. You blink, temples. He nods, priests need bread too. Gods don't rest just because the sun does. You ask if he ever forgets a delivery. Once, he admits. The next day, the temple of Ceres had a rat problem. Coincidence? He raises his brows. Historians still debate. You smile and you still deliver. Every night, he lifts the basket lid. Inside, round loaves wrapped in cloth, stamped, fragrant, steady. I'm not religious, he adds, but I believe in promises. That feels like a Roman thing to say. He offers you one on the house for the road. You take it. He rows away in near silence, his boat trailing wake like ribbon over silk. You sit on a low bench by the bank, the loaf in your lap. Its warmth seeps through the cloth like memory. You tear off a piece and let the rest beside you. You're not hungry, but that's not the point. Some things aren't meant to be eaten. They're meant to be held, to be offered, to be remembered. The final stretch of night brings a kind of softness that can't be described, only felt. Even Rome feels sleepier now. The stones no longer echo, they muffle. The air is cooler, kind. The city has settled into its bones. You follow a path near the Palatine where old villas once perched like gossiping elders. Most are shadows now, walls crumbling, gardens vanished. But a few pieces linger. A mosaic floor here, a fragment of wall painting there, and one very unexpected thing. The doors. Just standing there, not attached to anything, carved from oak, weathered but upright. A small plaque beside it reads, "The threshold of the baker's house." You blink, it doesn't make sense, and yet somehow it does. A historian passing by sees your confusion. It was a training house, she says, for young bakers, apprentices. They learned not just how to bake, but how to listen. To ovens, you ask. To each other, she replies. You had to hear someone else's needing rhythm before you were allowed to use fire. Though that sounds too poetic to be real, but you don't question it. The door, she tells you, was saved when the rest of the structure collapsed. Now it stands as a monument, not to walls or ovens or guilds, but to beginnings. And every baker passed through here, she says. Rich or poor, slave or freed, this was the start. Now you step toward it and place your palm against the wood. It's rough, honest, familiar. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sound of laughter, shouting, footsteps, the heartbeat of dough being beaten into shape. Though the historian nods. When people ask me why I study bread, I tell them, because it remembers the hands that shaped it. And you get it now. You're not just learning history. You're being kneaded into it. You head back down the slope toward the forum, which by night feels less like a seat of empire and more like a very ancient living room, left undusted but still beloved. Here, beneath the open sky, you find a small group seated around another modest altar. They're older, quieter, each with a small loaf in their lap. Well, one of them looks up and gestures for you to sit. This isn't a ceremony, not exactly, it's more like remembering together. As a man clears his throat and begins to speak, not loudly, not just gently, as if continuing a conversation left unfinished yesterday. My father was a baker, he says. He believed that bread shouldn't rise too fast, said it made people impatient. A woman beside him adds, mine said the crust always tells the truth. You can lie with spices, but never with a crust. Someone chuckles, another sighs. Each person offers a memory. Not dramatic, not grand, just crumb-sized truths passed through generations. You ask if this is a regular gathering. So they nod. For Fornax, you ask. For the people who fed us, one woman says, and the people we've fed. No altar flames, no chanted prayers, just bread broken into small pieces and handed around, warm from pockets and fresh cloth. You receive yours and hold it for a moment before eating. It's plain, beautifully so. Someone offers wine. Someone else reads a short blessing, nothing formal, just a soft thank you to fire, to flour, to hands. And then slowly, people begin to drift away, leaving behind nothing but a few crumbs and a flicker of warmth that lingers in the air. You stay behind for a while. You don't speak. You just listen to the memory of hands. Time to the slow cooling of bread. Time to Rome itself whispering, you're part of this now. The dawn brushes the city with hesitant gold, as if unsure whether Rome is ready to be seen again. The lamps are out. The pigeons begin to stir, and the streets, those ever-watchful veins of stone, yawn back to life. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, but because you're not ready to let go. Something about the night, the bread, the warmth, it clings like flour to fingertips. You find yourself near a set of arches you've never noticed before, tucked behind a vine-covered wall. Above them, an inscription barely visible. Here the ovens sang. It's a poetic way of saying that once this was a communal bakery, maybe even one of the first. There's no official sign, just a lingering smell of ash in the stones and a rusted paddle still leaning where someone left it a lifetime ago. You sit on a broken step and think of all the people who once stood here, who carried dough in baskets, who shared fire, who gossiped, grumbled, and gave away the crust to hungry kids with no coins. As a woman walks by with a sack of flour over her shoulder. She nods as she passes. That's all. No words, just the quiet nod of one pilgrim recognizing another. You take the final bit of your midnight loaf from your satchel, the one the boatman gave you, and place it on the oven ledge. Then offering a farewell or just a thank you. You whisper something to Fornax, not a prayer exactly, more like a promise, that you'll remember, that you'll share what you've learned, that you'll let your own life rise slowly, patiently. Behind you a rooster crows, too early, too proud. You smile. And for the first time all night, you feel ready to sleep. You begin the slow walk back through the heart of Rome, now blooming with the first true light. Vendors are unlocking shutters. Steam rises from pots. And somewhere, someone's already arguing about garlic. You pass a bakery again. She's sweeping the stoop just like before, just like always. She spots you, smirks, and says, "Well, you're either up early or out late. I can't decide which I respect more." You smile. "I saw Fornax's." She raises an eyebrow. "Did she approve of your shoes?" You both laugh. She tosses you a fresh roll without asking. You catch it, still warm, still soft in the middle. "That one's a lucky batch," she says. "Rosemary, salt, and a whisper of good fortune." You thank her and keep walking. The city is fully awake now, but there's still a dream stitched into its rhythm. You see it in the girl tying her apron, in the man flipping loaves with practiced grace, in the child counting sesame seeds like they matter more than gold. And above it all, the ovens breathe. They are not machines, they are not tools. They are hearths, living spaces where time slows and hope warms and something raw becomes something sustaining. You realize something just then. You've walked through a city, yes. But more than that, you've walked through a recipe, through dough and myth, through superstition and flame, through laughter, crumbs, and memory. And at the center of it all always is Fornax. Not as a statue, not even as a goddess, but as a whisper of warmth in every home where someone waits for bread to rise. You return to where it began, beneath the shadowed arches near the edge of the bakery district has fully reawakened. The streets smell of yeast, smoke, and citrus peel. Voices are brighter now, busy with the business of living, but you walk through it like a ghost from the night shift. As everything feels familiar but slower, or maybe you're just moving differently now. You stop once more at its door. She's inside now, shaping dough with calm, quiet hands, not rushed, not mechanical. Rhythmic, like someone in conversation with something invisible. She doesn't see you and you don't call to her. Some moments don't need to be shared. You pass by the old bench with the crooked nose carving. The pigeons are awake. One pecks at a seed, then looks at you like it remembers something, or maybe like you forgot something. Hard to say with pigeons. You visit the mural again, the Fornax with fire in her robes, paddle in hand. A few new offerings have been left overnight. A fig, a coin, a crust shaped like a heart. You sit for a while not because you're tired, but because this is what you do when a story ends. You sit and let the warmth of it settle. You reach into your satchel and touch the little clay oven, the wax scroll, the pouch of scent, the roll from the river, and a handful of memories that weren't there yesterday. Rome hasn't changed, but you have. And isn't that what bread does? It takes what's simple, what's soft, what could mold or scatter, and it gives it heat, time, intention. It becomes something. So do you. And now, as the story folds closed like a baker's towel at the end of a long day, we return to you. Your breath is. Your bed. Your warmth is. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest in your lap. You've walked through marble streets and firelit bakeries, carried loaves across rivers, and listened to gods who don't need worship, only remembering. Let your thoughts drift like flower on the breeze. Some will settle, some will rise. None of them need shaping now. The city fades behind you, but it doesn't vanish. It lingers beneath your eyelids in the smell of something toasted, in the soft weight of a shared crust. Though the ovens are quiet now, the benches are empty. Fornax is somewhere nearby maybe, or maybe she's resting too. You've learned her language of slow rising, of sacred waiting, of hands that shape what matters. Let that learning rise in you gently. Not everything needs to be done tonight. Some things like good bread and good stories are best left to rest. So inhale and feel the warmth. Exhale and let it stay. Sleep is rising now, like a soft dough beneath a linen cloth. You don't need to do anything more. You've already arrived. A good night from Whispers of History. And may your dreams be warm, round, and golden.